Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 102. I'm joined today by the lead academy sports scientist at Millwall and S&C coach at DS Performance, Darren Stern. How are you, mate?
Yep, very good, thanks. Very good. Can't complain during these times.
Well, thank you for coming on the podcast. We had a good chat a few weeks ago now, and there's some exciting stuff to run through. And there's a little hint in the titles, because obviously we're going to talk about everything that you've got going on, and I know you've got plenty going on as well. So do you want to just take us back, mate, like we do with everyone? Just go through your background and your journey so far.
Yeah, so I started off, if I go way back, when I was about 16 years old, had quite a bad knee injury. I was playing football at the time, and basketball. Funnily enough, everyone laughs when I say that because I'm only 5'7". But I was playing basketball for Great Britain and football, and I had a really bad knee injury and sort of ended up stopping playing competitively, both of them. Which got me into sort of the idea of sport and rehabilitation and strength and conditioning. I took that up into university, where I went to Birmingham, where I studied sport and exercise science. I get asked quite a lot by sort of young aspiring practitioners, which routes did you go down to do what you do? And I started off quite general, so looking at sport and exercise science. And since then I've branched out into like a nutrition diploma and strength and conditioning masters at Middlesex. But after finishing my undergrad, I went straight and sent my email out and CV to every football club in London area, where I was living. And Brentford got back to me pretty much within a couple of days. And I went in there probably a couple of weeks after graduating and literally started as an intern, and was lucky enough to get a full-time role there within the academy. And my main role was sort of to set up the academy. That they had no sports science within the academy when I started. This was in 2010, and what they wanted to do, they had a project, a 5-year project where they wanted to compete with the best academies in the UK. And in my opinion, over the 5-6 years, we really created an unbelievable environment within Brentford for players to develop. And during my 6th season there, the owners and the directors decided to close the academy, and the academy shut down. And then from there, I came out of that, and I set up my own performance-related business, which is called DS Performance, and that was in 2016. And that was helping, ideally, youth athletes to physically develop and to improve on their athletic development, mainly in football. I was doing that for about 6 months with one-to-ones and a few small groups, before I had the opportunity to jump back into football at Millwall Football Club, as sort of the head of academy sports science there, which takes me to where I am now. And I do the both together. I run my own business alongside being the academy sports science at Millwall.
And you've mentioned there, obviously, about your own business, and I know that'll catch a few people's attention because there's a lot of people doing that now. So what was the reason at that time for setting up?
So while I set my business up, I mean, the question that I started to ask myself while I was at Brentford towards the end, before it sort of the academy closed down, was, are elite youth academy players doing enough S&C in order to develop physically? And I think the question with all S&C coaches in all academies is, we turn around and say, well, we need more time with players in order for them to develop physically, and the coaches turn around and say, well, we need more time with them on the football pitch to develop technically and tactically. And I think that's always a debate that goes on, and I sort of asked myself that question. And once Brentford closed down, I sort of had 150 players within the academy, which at the click of a finger need to go and find another football club. And from that, a lot of parents and players themselves came up to me and asked, do I mind helping out with their son's development until they go and find another club. And I said, yeah, sure, no problem. So the business sort of fell into my lap really. And I started setting it up, and then year on year, I've sort of develop it over time, and progressed. And what sort of happened is players that I was working with that were ex-Brentford sort of youth players have now gone off and joined Man City and Chelsea and Tottenham, Reading, all different clubs, you know, across the whole of the UK. And I've kept in contact with them, and I've kept doing sessions with them and parents as well. And pretty much the same question, you know, gets asked is, are they doing enough in all these different academies? Are those players doing enough from an S&C point of view in order to develop physically? Which is pretty much the question I ask myself, and the reason why I've set up my business, which is thriving now, which is great, in order to help these players develop physically, and, you know, in all areas. You know, it's not just one area. It's a long-term plan for these guys, and I sort of set it up to help assist, you know, players and the parent on their physical development.
And I suppose the big challenge with working privately with players, something that you'll be well aware of being at a club as well, and this is something that I spoke about with numerous people before, because some practitioners that aren't in football won't be aware of this at all, is the fact of linking in with the club as well, isn't it? So how do you find, what's your approach to linking in with that club? So if you've got a player from a Chelsea or someone like that, they're obviously going to be doing some work at the club as well. So what's your approach to that?
Yeah, so obviously I've been working in academy football now for over 10 years. I think it's my 12th season now in academy football. Time flies, but with the new EPPP rules that have come into place, all academies have to have some aspect of strength and conditioning as part of their program, and I'm fully aware of that. And a lot of academies now under this EPPP would have to have individual learning plans for all the players as well, to develop physically, technically, tactically, and socially. So my approach is speaking to the player and the parent about what is that player's individual learning plan that the club and the academy have given that player, and then I try and assist with working on that, if that's their strengths or their weaknesses. For example, their weaknesses, all I'm trying to do with that is work alongside the club to get the best out of the player, help the parent. For example, if they have certain questions, they might not feel comfortable going to the club and asking, you know, I'm there that they can ask me questions about, and I'm just there to assist with that. You know, a big part of my work is ultimately to get that player at the best level they can be, and a lot of the time that you see these individual players, they're in big squads and big academies, and they might not have a big individual emphasis, but what I try then do is assist through good coaching, alongside their individual plan that the academies have given that player, to try and make them even better, so that when they go back to the club, maybe those weaknesses are not those weaknesses anymore, and those strengths are even better. They become their super strengths. And that's sort of how I work, you know, with the player, you know, on a one-to-one basis. And I always am open, you know. For example, if coaches or S&C coaches within those clubs want to get in touch with me, that you know, I'm always open to say that, by all means, you know, give them my details, let them call me, or we can speak, you know, even more details about the player, because ultimately the player is the most important.
It's something we spoke about on the phone, isn't it? Is that a program, an S&C program, can be done very differently. So you could write a program down, give it to a player, they could go off and do it, and their views of it being done well and your views of it being done well could be very different, couldn't they? That's not to say that all players are like that, but it could be the case, isn't it? So is that where you see the true value? Is obviously that you're there, you're coaching through the program, as well as them doing the exercises that have been prescribed?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even if I just take the last sort of 6 months, you know, during this COVID period, a lot of players got provided programs to be doing at home. Now, coming from an academy setup, you know, we did the same. We provided Millwall Academy players with programs to go and complete by themselves. Now, what you do as when you work for within an academy is you provide the program and you give the player the independence to complete it themselves, and you try and assist that through videos and the way you've coached previously when they've been with you, face to face. But what I try and do within my business is you work with that player to go through that program to make sure they're doing it properly, to make sure they're then getting the coaching that's appropriate for those exercises that's been set from the academy. It's not doing something completely different or speaking, to the player and say, oh no, what you've been sent is rubbish, I'm not going to do that. That's not how I work. I work alongside it and assist with good coaching to get those exercises done right, the technique right, and therefore for the player just keeps developing that way.
And what about the future of the business, Darren? Because obviously when things grow and you attract more players and you build that reputation of players coming to work with you, you've only got so many hours in the day, and especially being at a club as well. So how does it look for you, whether it's in your head or whether you've got actual plans in place for scaling the business?
Yeah, it's something I've had in my head for quite a while, and it's something that I'm looking at doing is having my own sort of training facility. That might be 5, 10, 15 years down the line. But it's just a vision of mine, having, players come to your facility and having the ability to one, maybe complete their programs that clubs have set them with good coaching face to face, or players that might not have programs for whatever reason, and you assisting them that way. You're putting a program in place for them, and it's a complete individual program for them in a facility that allows player to optimize his development time. Now that might not only be youth athletes, that we could be talking first team athletes, under 23 athletes, even different sports, but a facility which allows good coaching, and optimal development, education, and moving forward that way. But timeframes, I'm not sure of that, but it's a vision.
Yeah, definitely. Because I know a lot of people will be in that sort of position when they go into private practice and private work. Then you're managing your diary, you're trying to fit people in. People want to train at different times. You've obviously got, if you're working with players at clubs, they have to fit in the training with the club as well, don't they? So then it's trying to find the time that fits around without doing too much on one day. So it does become a bit of a balancing act, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think you've got to be really organized. You got to, be good with your time management skills, and being able to organize not only your own diary, but then also what you got to juggle is each individual player will be on a completely different schedule as well, as you sort of mentioned. So you might see one player and he might have played a game the day before and he might be exhausted. So now you might not be doing the same types of work that you do with him on a normal day. So you've got to be super organized with how you work, and understanding that each player is completely different, and you can't just, think that player is going to be able to do everything on that one session that you plan, because within, the one player I may work with might have a game on a Tuesday night. I might be with him on a Wednesday, and, he might be really tired from the Tuesday night game. Likewise, I might be training someone on a Thursday and they've done nothing since Monday. So again, those sessions might look very, very different, and it's based on the individual and how he feels and what he can and can't do.
And you touched on it before in terms of the playing time sort of S&C ratio. So what are your views on that? Where do you think we currently sit? And it can be very broad, this, because I know every club is a little bit different. But where do you think we currently sit with academy players in terms of that ratio, and where do you think that needs to change?
So I think it is already changing slightly since when I started about 12 years ago. At the moment, I think if you look at a broad week, the EPPP are sort of talking about 10 to 14 hours of football time a week, which is quite a high amount. But again, you're looking at probably maybe only 1 hour to maybe hour and a half of S&C time a week. If you're looking at that as a ratio, you're looking at for every hour they do S&C, they're doing 10 hours of football or 12 hours of football. And as I go back to my business, when I spoke about that, the question then comes, are the players doing enough S&C to allow them to develop physically? And I completely understand that they are trying to be footballers and they need to play football. But at the same time, they're also a big part of football, and the way football is going is it's becoming more athletic. You know, players are getting faster, stronger, jumping higher, breaking records on GPS distance covered in a game. And we push players to be able to cope with the intensity demands of the game. So for me, is it enough? Is the $1 million question. You can be really clever with how you work as an S&C coach within an academy, but that for me is the one. And the way I think about it is I don't think they are doing enough S&C in order to develop physically, in comparison to football time, and that in my opinion.
And then the other thing with that is, which will cover, this will relate to a lot of coaches, is finding time for S&C, isn't it? Because I suppose we have to create time, don't we, in certain situations. So what are your views on finding time for that S&C program?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to sort of a multidisciplinary approach to the player development. I'm really fortunate that at Millwall we've got a great sort of individual development program in place, and we sort of have incorporated S&C into the program, you know, in trying to find innovative ways sort of within the training to have extra S&C for them. And you know, some examples are, we've got running clubs that go on, we've got strength clubs that go on, we've got various different goalkeeper clubs that go on. And these are small little groups of athletes that train together that work on individual S&C type work, instead of doing the football work. So, for, you know, a really easy example is if you've got a 2-hour training window, you might have 15 players out of 20 that just do football for the 2 hours, but you might have 5 that come to you and do, you know, an extra half an hour, 45 minutes of a running club. And within that running club, it might be acceleration mechanics, it might be sprinting, it might be, you know, working on those S&C type qualities to allow that player to develop those physical qualities. So I think it comes down to being innovative, and having a really good multidisciplinary approach with the coaches, to try and ultimately get the best out of every individual that you can. Because ultimately the aim is to get, well, whether it's youth athletes, you know, 9 to 16-year-old, it's to get them into a scholarship and ultimately to get them into a first team. And if that's in your academy, it's your first team. And if not, you know, further up, you know, Premier League, international, you know, the best that they could be.
Because it's a real life battle, isn't it? I mean, I suppose the thing that a lot of coaches will face is that they get given like the warm-up time. So the 15, 20 minutes before a session, you've got that time to take players and obviously deliver an S&C program. But that isn't a lot, is it, throughout the week? So that's a real life battle we face in academy football, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's quite a normal, isn't it? It's, yeah, you S&C coach, yeah, just take them for the warm up and it's 15 minutes. We've sort of flipped it on its head a bit at Millwall, and I speak about that maybe the warm up can be done by the coach in regards to ball mastery or any types of football type drills, technical ball drills, and then we might take them second. So you don't actually lose any time with them having to get warm, which might take 5 to 10 minutes in order to get into your 5-10 minutes of really good quality work. They're already warm. So now you've got 20 minutes of good quality work with them, if that's on the pitch. So again, it's just being innovative and trying to find ways that it works. You know, I know, and I've seen in in other clubs and other places abroad as well. You know, carousel type practices where it's part of the actual main session. You know, 30 minutes, you've got 2 football stations and you've got an S&C station, and you work that way. And I think, as I mentioned before, it's about having a good relationship and good communication with the coaches you work with, because ultimately the players are the most important, you know, and they need to be able to thrive in a good environment to develop in all aspects.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And the coach is taking the warm up, that it sort of questions the norm with it, doesn't it? Like we get put into that mold of like, yeah, we'll do the warm up and then you can move on to your football. Whereas if they get the warm up done, you think I suppose it prioritizes the S&C work a little bit more, doesn't it? And gives a slightly different importance to it.
Yeah, I think players see it differently. They don't just see you as the warm-up guy. They see you now as someone that's trying to help them physically develop, you know, in one, you know, whether that be speed, change direction, you know, power, strength, you know, whichever quality you're trying to work on. Again, they see it differently. They view it differently.
Yeah, definitely. And then I wanted to move it on into some of your views on future research, because it's something that I do like asking practitioners, something that whether you've got any views on yourself doing research or any research that may need to be done to improve your practice.
Yeah, so I think over the last sort of 4 years, I've created a really good link with Middlesex University, and it probably coincided with me doing my strength and conditioning masters at Middlesex University. One of my studies that I have completed in an area of interest, which is linked into sort of my PhD question that I want to answer, is bilateral versus sort of unilateral bias training, and which training is superior for certain physical qualities or performance markers. For me, that's a question I've probably asked myself for the last 10 years, but now I'm in a position. I had a paper that I published on a training intervention in August. It should be in this JSCR. It was a training intervention study over 6 weeks, and bilateral versus unilateral training on performance markers. But that's the question I want to answer. For me, that's an area of interest. You know, do you train players unilaterally or do you train players bilaterally? And if you do, which one has a better performance enhancing effect? And it might be different across different physical qualities. So it's something I'm looking at the moment in a sort of a meta-analysis, is which one's better for jumping, and which training modality is better for sprinting, or which modality is better to get the athlete stronger. And that's the question I want answered, really. So that's why I'm doing, or you know, investing all this time into the research to hopefully answer that question for my own PhD.
That's definitely a subject that people have quite strong views on, isn't it? And I've heard loads of people speaking recently on that subject, and there's loads of people doing exactly what we talked about in this episode, questioning the norm and trying to think outside the box a little bit with the approach. So what's your approach currently with that? Do you do a little bit of both, or do you lean more to one side?
My current approach, I think it depends on the athletes that you have. I think there's a huge specificity to the training modality you use. And in my last paper that got published, it found exactly that you know, if you train unilaterally, you get better unilaterally, and if you train bilaterally, you get better bilaterally. So I think both training interventions had large improvements in the performance. So again, I would like to think football is quite a unilateral sport in nature. So you know, in regards to kicking, sprinting, accelerating, everything is unilateral. heading. It's all unilateral in nature. And so I've shifted more to the unilateral type exercises, based off the fact that if the specificity question is if you get better on one leg, then if you get stronger on one leg and you train on one leg, then you get better on one leg. And if football is a unilateral sport, then ultimately maybe we should be training unilaterally. So I've shifted more to that side at the moment. However, for certain individuals, I can understand why bilateral exercises are easier, because you don't have the proprioceptive element to it. You don't have to balance as much. You don't have, you potentially could shift heavier weights if that's required in regards to maximal force. So it depends on the athlete that you're working with. But generally speaking, if I can move across to unilateral exercises, that's the way I would go at the moment.
Yeah, it's definitely a really interesting area, isn't it? Because I think going back a few years, we'd have been setting a bit of a mold that you start. I think a lot of people would have probably started unilaterally, wouldn't they, and added that extra instability to exercises, and then moved on to more bilaterally. But like you say, you can load up bilateral exercises a little bit more. Just being a little bit more stable. So it's a really interesting discussion, isn't it, on where that fits into the training cycle?
Yeah, exactly. And again, you'll have, especially across a squad of, 25 athletes, you'll have players that literally cannot balance on one leg. But then you'll have other players that have got really good proprioceptive type skills and, can load up, in a unilateral exercise, like a Bulgarian split squat or something like that. So again, I think it is individual specific, but and again, that's why I would like to take this part of research further and answer that question, which I'm doing. I'm doing it at the Middlesex University, and my supervisor, who's Chris Bishop, he's and Anthony Turner, who's over there. They're excellent, and trying to challenge the notion of what is better for what physical quality is what we're looking at.
And what about how you've used the academy setting for research? Because there'll be a lot of coaches out there obviously working within an academy. So what's been your experience on using the academy setting to do your research?
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite fortunate that I work within a really good club, and it's very forward thinking, and ultimately you're using the research to try and inform practice. For example, when you're doing the research, you're trying to use that research to then practically apply it into your setting to then help what you do and help ultimately help the club's philosophies and the club syllabus. So my football club have been great with me using the players in order to then get the information and then potentially use that information to inform what we're doing, or maybe even change what we're doing for the better. And again, taking it to the bigger picture, the players within a football club, they're a homogenous group. They're elite athletes, and you can get some really good, meaningful data, which is impactful to all practitioners. You've got elite athletes there. They're not, sedentary athletes. They're the elite, and a homogenous group where you can really practically apply what you found to other elite settings to try and impact performance. So hopefully, you're getting meaningful data for other practitioners that want to or learn the information that you're getting from the data.
Definitely. It's definitely it's an opportunity, isn't it, for coaches to do that work. And like you say, it can improve the practice that's going on at that individual club as well. So there's benefits all around.
Yeah, exactly. Benefits all around, and not only that, other practitioners, sharing information and using that to help inform practice is ultimately what we all as coaches want to do, right?
Yeah, definitely. Darren, I wanted to finish up with something that we just introduced onto the podcast, a bit of quick fire. So I've not given you too much of a heads up on this, but the questions aren't too hard.
Yeah.
It'll just be interesting to see where you go with some of these. So first question is, who has been your biggest career influence so far? And you can have a few on this if you want.
So first up, probably the guys down at Brentford when I first started. They've really helped shape the practitioner I am and challenge, views and perspective on how we train. So the Chris Haslam down at Brentford, gave me my opportunity when I came straight out of university, and Neil Gregg down there, who were in the first team there. They've really helped shape me as a practitioner. And then as I've gone on with my journey, the guys at Middlesex University, again, just helping that research to practice and being really practical with your approach, and having a really good foundation of science, but then being able to apply it into a practical setting. And those are mainly the two guys that have helped me. Finally, I've never met them, but all about cueing and how we coach. So internal versus external cues is some of the research that I've really enjoyed reading recently, and how to get the best out of cues to athletes. Final one just on that is, I think COVID's helped with everyone do that, because with people training online, you've had to be really specific with how you tell athletes what to do and how they do it. And I think everyone's had to come up with really innovative ways to coach players through a computer screen. So I think that's quite a big one.
Yeah, definitely. So on that, the internal, external, have you got someone in mind?
Yeah, Nick Winkelman's got.
I thought you were going to say Nick. I was just going to.
Yeah. So yeah, he's got loads of books and research on that, and podcasts, and he does everything on it. So
yeah, awesome. And then next one, in your opinion, what's your biggest strength as a coach?
I think you have to be passionate about what you do. I think you have to love what you do, which I do. I love educating players, making them better. And for me, that's the biggest motivator. So when you go to work every day, you enjoy it, you embrace the environment, you look at the athletes, not only just as an athlete, but as a person. So you speak to them on a personal level. And I think that's how you get the best out of the athlete. I think a lot of athletes, when they move on with their career, they don't remember they might not remember how the coach coached, but what they might remember is the relationship that they had with the coach. So they might not remember that you told them to, during acceleration, take off like a rocket, but they might remember that you asked them, how their family is, and took a real interest in how the person is, how's their family life, how's their brother, how's their sister, where they go on holiday, those types of questions are just as important to build up a relationship and trust.
Awesome. And the next one, what's the best bit of CPD you've done recently?
Oh, great question. A lot of the CPD stuff, I looked internally. So I started sort of self-assessing what I did as a person. So during COVID, a lot of stuff went online. There was, Zoom seminars on this and conferences on that. And I attended loads initially, and literally for hours of the day, literally watched loads of different people presenting, which was fantastic. To learn about research and further knowledge. I think the best CPD I've just done is looking at myself and the practice that I do, and seeing what I do at Millwall. Does it work? Does it not work? What should I change? Am I doing it the right way? And really critiquing my own practice to then take it forward. And a lot of the stuff that I was doing, I've actually stopped doing this, or we'll stop doing this season, because ultimately time is so important. So if you're spending a lot of time doing something which actually you might not be using as a practitioner, or coaches might not be using to inform decision making, then ultimately you've got to ask yourself, why are you doing it? I think that for me is one of the biggest things that I've done in the last sort of, recently.
I think that's a great point. And it's been the perfect time for that, really, hasn't it? I think a lot of people would have done that, some at different degrees to others, but it's definitely been a period of sort of self-reflection for a lot of people, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think self-reflection's, massive in practice, and it allows you to really not only establish your own philosophies and reiterate the points what you're doing might be the right thing to do, but it also allows you to get rid of and focus on the quality. So, why are you collecting that bit of data, and are you using that bit of data? And if you're not, then can you use the data? And if you can use the data, how are you going to use the data? And ultimately, it boils down to, if you can use the data and is the data getting used, then you keep doing it. But if you're not, then you might be best not taking that data in the first place.
Yeah. And then final two, the best relatable trait from a coach.
Communication. Communication for me is probably one of the biggest things. Not only communication with players, but communication with coaches. I mentioned it before, that multidisciplinary approach. If you've got a good communication with all coaches and with all players, then ultimately the environment's going to be better that you're going to work in. And it's just creating that environment and that culture of excellence, which ultimately what you've got to do.
And then the same question really, but for a player?
I've got two for this one. One for a player to be resilient. I think learning from failure, so being resilient when they fail, to bounce back. And I mean, it's a similar type, but working hard. I don't think any player should stop working. I think working hard is the minimum. And I mean, that doesn't have to be, running the most, but just putting your all into every single training session, like it's your last one. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but it's true. The more you put in, the more you get out.
I think they were great, mate. I think that I really like them last two. I think they're definitely something that a lot of coaches can relate to with players, isn't it? Because regardless of talent, like they're really important for any player to have.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's you can control it. A lot of people say it, but control the controllables, and I think it's quite a nice. You might not be able to control if you get picked for the starting 11 or if you get signed by a certain club, but what you can control is what you eat. If you're going to an S&C session or if you're going to the gym to do extra work, you can control being on time. That's hard for some people. Little things like that, which make a big difference. Yeah,
definitely. No, I fully agree with that. Darren, this has been great, mate. I think we got through some good stuff there. Yeah. So big thanks for coming on.
Nah, pleasure. Been my pleasure. These have been great, Ben. Really enjoyed listening to them all. I can't believe you're on episode. You're over 100 now. Quick fire time.
Yeah, it's gone. It's been a mad time, mate, to be honest. But there's been reflecting on. I'm just currently putting together a webinar for our community members on some takeaways from the 100, and it's you sort of, when you start flicking back through it, like you've talked about some self-reflection, you realise how much good quality stuff's come from all the guests. So I honestly appreciate everyone coming on and yourself as well. So thanks for giving up your time.
A pleasure. Been a pleasure.
And all the best when the season gets going again, mate.
Yeah. Thanks so much. September 12th at the moment, so fingers crossed.
And we'll catch up soon, Darren.
Cheers, Ben. Thanks very much.
Thanks, mate. Bye.
Bye-bye.